We'll do a review of Lekutei Sichos in Chelek Yudches, volume 18, the third Sikh of the Parsha Shelach. The Rebbe explains there's several psukim in the Pshutei Shel Mikra, and the Rebbe starts off that there is a very deep insight over here in the Yena Shel Torah and the wondrous things from the Rashi. The Rebbe connects these two interpretations in the Rashi to the machloikes between the Rambam and the Ravid as far as the status of the Chavim, as far as whether they have a Metzias of the Chavim, non-Jews, or it is a Metzias of Heder, the two explanations as the Rebbe goes on. But first the Rebbe goes through explaining the several psukim over here according to the Pirush, the Pashto Pshat. And the Rebbe actually first starts off by saying that while you want to take out the wondrous and the Mefloim, the Yena Shel Torah of Rashi, but first you got to learn the Rashi in the simple Pshat. Aleph. Shengeret Filmol, we already discussed many times, as Pirush Rashi ala Torah, that Rashi's commentary on the Torah, Hagam azer kumt lefarer zayin pshutei shel mikra. Although Rashi is coming to give us the simple meaning of the verse, V'Rashi alein is madgish kama v'kama pomim. Rashi himself emphasizes many times, ungleich in the erste sedra, and immediately in the first sedra, in the Chumash Bereishis, in the sedra of Bereishis. So Rashi says, "The vanili bosi alul pshutei." That I have come only to give you the simple meaning. So, notwithstanding the fact that this is the Rashi's main goal, Rashi says to explain the literal, the simple meaning. But still, Rashi holds, it contains in itself very wondrous things from the andere Chelkei Torah, from the other portions of the Torah. I see even the secrets. So you have the Pshat, Remesh, Drush, Soid. Soid is the secrets of the Torah. Even to that extent, secrets of the Torah are also included in the Rashi. We know the Alter Rebbe's expression. He said, as Pirush Rashi of Chumash, that the commentary of Rashi and the Chumash is Yena Shel Torah. It's like the wine of Torah. In order for us to be able to reach and grasp these wonderful matters, first, in the wine of Torah, in Pirush Rashi, first we must go through and learn and understand the simple meaning. And then we'll get to the deeper and the secrets and the wondrous things. In Yena Shel Torah, because also these wonderful matters and the wine of Torah, Rashi has put it in his commentary, like Pshutei Shel Mikra, according to the simple meaning of the verse. So you have to first know the simple meaning, because to other things will be included in it. Euch bePirush Rashi gefindt man so everything that was put in, even these Inyanim Mefloim, is Rashi put it in Zayin Pirush lePshutei Shel Mikra according to the simple meaning of the pasuk. So the Rebbe is leading up that in the Parsha Seinu gefindt man a Pirush from Rashi. We find a Rashi explanation was halt in Yonim Mufloim and Derech HaHalacha that contains wondrous matters according to the path of Halacha. Unoich Yena Shel Torah, also the wine of Torah, the secrets of Torah. Aber früher darf man beweisen sein der Pirush HaPashut von Odam Pirush Rashi. But first we need to explain the simple meaning from this Rashi. So the first thing that the Rebbe is going to explain over here is this very simple meaning in the regular Rashis. The Rebbe is going to go through several Rashis in the Parsha. So in Hamshach HaKsuvim B'Parsha Seinu, in the flow of the verses in our parsha was Verder Zelt, in which it relates Vos Yeshua and Kolev Gezokt al Kol Adas B'nei Yisrael, that which Yeshua and Kolev, the two of the spies, who didn't go along with the other spies, and when they said to the Jewish community, B'Negeya da Marangin in Eretz Yisrael, as it relates to entering Eretz Yisrael. So state in Pasuk it says, Ach b'Hashem al timroidu. Don't rebel against Hashem. Be'atem al tiru es amoritz. And you don't fear the people, the nation that lives there, the land. Ki lachmeinu hey. They are like bread, like our bread. Sor tzilum goimer, their shadow has been removed. This pasuk has several Rashis, and Rashi explains the different parts of this pasuk. The first part is Rashi maitik from pasuk the verter al timroidu. He says, "Don't rebel." Und is mefarish v'shuv v'atem al tiro. So then, if you don't rebel, then you don't have to fear. It seems like in the pasuk, maybe it's like two separate things. He's saying then, don't rebel against Hashem, and you don't fear the people. But Rashi connects the two. He says, if al timroidu, and then atam al tiro, then you don't have to fear them. Val tiro as amo oretz. Why does Rashi say it this way? Why does Rashi learn that this is really one sentence, that don't rebel Hashem, so you won't have to fear them? Taiche Meforshim, so Meforshim explain. Rashi kum zogen as der Hemshech HaKosu v'atem al tirohu goimer. The pasuk continues, and you will not fear them, is nit kein bazunder zach. This is not something separate. Nor al tiro is a titzoa from al timroidu. Al tiro is a consequence from al tiro, al timroidu, which means as oy b'Hashem al timroidu, if you will not rebel against Hashem, so then you won't have to fear them. But zayin shuv, then vatam al tiro, then you won't fear them. So Rashi is explaining here that these are not two separate statements. It's just a flow. First, he says, don't rebel again, and then you won't have to fear them. Why? Who says? So the first explain, Rashi's hechelch of them, what is Rashi's proof for this, is from the Shinu HaSeder, is from the change of the order. By al timroidu, over here it says, B'Hashem al timroidu. So by al timroidu steht früher in Vemen, for whom you will, for whom you should not rebel, against whom you should not rebel. And by al tiro, it says stay there noch, and then it says al tiro, it says amoritz, the people. And by al tiro, stay there noch far vemen. So here it says from whom, and then it says whom, amoritz. So it almost seems like it's one sentence. Don't rebel against Hashem. And then it says, so you won't have to fear them. So it's one sentence. From whom you won't fear, and then you won't have to rebel against, and then you won't have to be afraid of them. One sentence together. Or the Rebbe says, as am ha'oret oder fundam was steht, va'atem unit va'altiro. Others they say, because it says, Shem timroidim, va'altiro. What is this? Va'atem. Va'atem says, and you, since there's a follow-up. Mele, it's mashma from the pasuk that it's really one hemshach, one thing. Don't rebel against Hashem, then you won't fear the nations. Don't rebel against Hashem. And then Ba'atem, and then you will not be afraid. But according to this, it means the proof is from the word Ba'Hashem, and also that it says Altim Roidu, Amoritz. But Rashi does not quote, doesn't quote Ba'Hashem, and doesn't bring down Atam Altirus Amoritz. So it doesn't seem like that is the Rashi's proof. The beer is over kosher. This explanation is, however, is difficult. Because Rashi should have quoted from the verse, should have started off with saying Ba'Hashem, because this Ba'Hashem and tells us that Altiru, that you're not going to be afraid from them. Okay, Altiru Samoritz. So Rashi should have first of all said Ba'Hashem. Rashi should have brought that down, because this is how we're learning it from the Ba'atim, the Amoritz, or the Akoponim Zemer Amazan with the Goymer. At least Rashi should have said the Goymer, because those are the words, the Ba'Hashem and Atam Altiris Amoritz, those are the words that force Rashi's pshat. So the question is, what pushed Rashi, what forced Rashi to say it's one hemshach? But it doesn't seem like it's the word beginning and there. From them was Rashi bringt nicht dem Wort Ba'Hashem und nicht the weitere Werte vom Pasuk. He doesn't bring the word Ba'Hashem, and also not the further words of this pasuk. His move on, it's understood as ein hechrech is beikir al kaponim, that his force mainly, maybe this is also Nit for Lashon HaKosov, it's not the language of the pasuk, but for the Mtoichen in Altim Roidu, from the contents of the inyan of Altim Roidu. That's the main thing. Rashi knows that it is one part when Altim Roidu, then Altiru, as Amorigin, don't have to be afraid of it. That's the question on the first Rashi. Then the Rashi has a next comment. The noch stellt sich Rashi if the Werter kilach meinuin. Rashi bases himself on the words, they are our bread. When the Farish, and Rashi explains, Neuchlem kilach, basically we'll eat them as bread. So what does it mean? We'll eat them as bread. Isn't it verstanden? Several questions over here. Eat them like bread means it'll be easy for us, just like eating bread. What is Rashi telling us, coming up with this idea over here, a novelty? She's moving by pashtus. This is obvious as lachmeinu haim benegeya odom, that when you say my bread, when we talk about there's my bread, meitnit as they mention an lechem, it doesn't mean those people are actually bread. Nor she's an oistruk. This is an expression. As mevet semen etzer sein as a gring v'esen lechem, that you're going to be victorious to them as easy as eating bread. Like there's an expression, it's like a piece of cake. It's going to be easy as eating bread. But that's obvious. That's the way people do. You can't say we don't eat people, so it's not lechem when you say. So it means that. So what does Rashi have to tell us that? On the other hand, the Rebbe says, since what we're intending here, that is as easy as eating. Eating takes no effort. You can eat it, so you can be victorious because eating them. So why does it have to say bread? I mean, any eating is doch gechilik nitzika lechem oder wie an ander meichel. So it really doesn't make a difference. It's easy as bread. It's like food. We should have said in the pasuk. Why is the pasuk emphasizing lachmeinu haim? Eat like bread. Why doesn't it just say kinechlam? We'll consume them. Stop. What is the diuk lachmeinu kilachem? What is the emphasis over here? We'll consume them like bread. Gimel. And third thing is, Adrabe, Rashi gedarf is Vayer sein. Rashi should have explained it. It says lachmeinu. The word lachmeinu in a broader sense doesn't necessarily mean bread. Food is called lechem also. So instead of Rashi explaining lachmeinu, that we'll eat them like bread, Rashi should have said we'll eat them like food. Rashi gedarf mevayer sein neichel kemeichel. In a general way, not bread, food. Niet dafke lechem. The pirish for lechem become. In many places, lechem means food. So we'll eat them like food. What does Rashi emphasize? He says, no, we'll eat them mamish like lechem. And number 4, Vavos is Rashi mighty from Posuk the word ki. Says ki lachmeinu haim. Why does it lachmeinu? Rashi doesn't explain the word ki. He just says lachmeinu haim. Next Rashi, Rashi Posik says their shadow has been removed. What is mefarish? What are we talking about? Which shadow? So Rashi gives 2 pshat. First of all, Rashi says maginom v'cheskom, their protector and their strength. And Rashi says kshedim shebehem mesu, that the righteous ones among them died. That provided sort of a shade and a protection. Was their strength and their protection. They died. Eiv shoyu megin aleim. Eiv, who was a tzaddik, he was a kosher, he was a righteous, he was a kosher, so he protected them, and now it's gone. It's one pshat. Another pshat, tziloi shel hamokim sor meleim. It is the shadow of Hashem has been removed from them. So we need to understand. Rashi in zwei Pirushim. Why does Rashi need 2 interpretation? What is the Maila in Yadran? What is the advantage of each one of these Pirushim? Okay, so first the Rebbe is going to address the first Rashi. How does Rashi know that it's one Hemshech? Don't rebel against Hashem, so you won't fear them. Why can't we say that separately? Don't fear them. And the Rebbe is going to explain, because without giving a reason not to fear them, it wouldn't make sense not to fear them, because even the Shua and Kolim never said that there's no reason to fear them. And even afterwards, when they tried to go up, Moshe Rabbeinu said that you're not going to be able to win them. And so why would he all of a sudden say Al Tiro? It has to be because, as a follow-up, because B'Hashem Al Timredu, then you won't have to fear them. Let's look inside. Hey, the Bir and Pirush Rashi. Rashi's hechlech to learn as Ba'atem Al Tiro is a titzor from Al Timredu. How does Rashi know that it's a result ultimately, and it's not just a matter on its own? Don't be afraid of them. It is as follows: because earlier it's related as the Meraglim of Gitaine, that the Meraglim argued that that the nation that sits in the land is strong. And all the people that we saw there are people of measure, big people. In our eyes, we looked like grasshoppers. So they looked at us. So, meaning that they expressed how strong those people were. They did not contradict these arguments. We don't find them saying that that's not true. So we have the question: how did they say? They expected, they demanded, don't be afraid. They did not give a reason. Why should we not be afraid? The kasha wird noch starker. And this question is even stronger. Because you see that even Moshe Rabbeinu said there's something to be afraid of, because the next morning, they got up in the morning. Here we are, we're going to go up. Moshe Rabbeinu warned, Al talu, don't go up, so you will not be plagued. The Amaleki the Kanani are there. Hastes doch. So what this means is, as I feel Moshe Rabbeinu gehalten, that even Moshe Rabbeinu was of the view, as is do an or farmoira, that there is room for fear. If I was hot, you have Yeshua and Kalev gesagt altiro. So why did Yeshua and Kalev say don't be afraid? So it doesn't really fit just to come out and say don't be afraid. Why would they say don't be afraid? Why not? Even Moshe Rabbeinu knows there's something to be afraid. It's one issue. Other issue is why when Moshe Rabbeinu was telling them not to go against Hashem, why Yeshua Kalev says, so why did they say just don't rebel against Hashem? Why don't they say we should go up to Eretz Yisrael, specifically address the situation here? Why do they say don't rebel against Hashem? What did they mean to say? As Yeshua and Kalev meant to say, as Mizom Mekayim Zayin, the Meibers to Sivu to Genkin Eretz Yisrael, that we should fulfill God's command to go to Eretz Yisrael. So it would seem they should have been directly to this specific topic over here. Don't rebel against Hashem. Go to Eretz Yisrael. Gain in Eretz Yisrael, to go in Eretz Yisrael. What is the Tzvi Klolus? Why is he just giving a general expectation, demand? Hashem ultimately don't rebel against Hashem. The rebellion is that they're not going to Eretz Yisrael. Why not spell it out and specify? So these questions Rashi answers with his commentary. If you don't rebel, then you won't have to fear. Yeshua v'kolev haben gesagt, as al tiro v'zayin atitzor von altim reidu. Yeshua said that don't be afraid, not just because don't be afraid, because it's a result of altim reidu. If you don't rebel as a general, then you won't have to be afraid. While it's true that it's powerful, the nation that sits in the land, and that allows room to be afraid of them. And yet, if you're not going to rebel, basically, if you listen to Hashem, you do what Hashem commands, shuv, is demut then, is demut lito, kishum or there is really then no room. Afila piteva, even according to nature, sumayrav, afila farashtarken folk. There's no room, even in nature, to be afraid even from a strong people, because you're not rebelling against Hashem. That is the reason. Und der Fahr haben Yeshua und Kalev gesagt, Hashem al timreidu. They didn't address directly, und nicht direkt, man soll gehen in Eretz Yisrael. Because Hashem al timreidu, they said, it's the rebellion that is going to bring about that you shouldn't be afraid, not to rebel. Hashem al timreidu mevatel the tiny ka'azahom. That is their time for Tiron. That's why you're not going to be afraid of them. That's why you will go with Eretz Yisrael. But the key is not to rebel Hashem. That gives the assurances that even with Hateva, you will not need to be afraid. Now the Rebbe explains the second Rashi. Al Pizei is Muban. Based on this understood, was behemshach lozeh is Rashi mefarish. Rashi follows this up with kilachmeinu heim, and we say noichlem kilechem, we'll eat like bread. And the Rebbe asked all the different questions before. So the Rebbe says like this: Do kemen b'meila darfmen taitchen lachmeinu b'pashtus lachem. Over here, even though lachmeinu can be there easy to conquer like lechem, but over here we are able to taich lachmeinu mamesh bread, and that's why we should touch it. Why? Oberlule pirush Rashi, because had it not been for Rashi, Voltman getaich lachmeinu heim, they're like bread. There are bread. Just like a person must have bread, they have no choice. You have to eat. So we would taich lachmeinu heim. We wouldn't taich it kipshuti lechem. We would say lachmeinu heim. Lachmeinu in the minas, the Knesset of Yisrael, it's our bread. That they're going into Yisrael under kibush and the Ma'am, and to conquer the nation that's in it is muchach pung bilechem. It's our bread. It's important. It's a necessity, just as bread. That's where you would have touched. Under mit wohl gewen verstandig, and then we would understand why specific bread to lechem davke. Und euch den Sinna stam would also understand ki lachmeinu heim, because they are our bread that we have to eat it. Don't be afraid of them because they are bread, because that's a necessity. They're kibush, uknisa. They're conquering and they're entering. Eretz Yisrael is mukhrach, is necessary as lechem, as bread. Umemel is mukhrach as altiro. Don't be afraid of them. That's without Rashi, we would have said that that's the meaning of kilachmeinu heim. Don't be afraid, because they are like our bread. We have to eat it. There's no choice, and therefore there's no reason to fear. But bibald ober as Rashi is mefarish. But since Rashi explains as be'atem al tiro, that don't be afraid is the farvos al timroidu. The reason why you're not going to be afraid because you don't rebel against Hashem, mitzad them was megate mitin koyach von Eibishter, is because you're going with the power of Hashem. So we can't say that why are you not going to be afraid is because we have to, because it's important like bread, because we're saying that we're not afraid because we're going with Hashem's koyach. It's al timroidu. That's the reason why we are not afraid. So why would he say kilachmeinu heim? So that's one reason we can't say that we have to eat them like bread. Also, if that would be the pshat that we're going to, it's like lechem, it's necessary. So what about these 39 years of bread you have to be all the time? The Yidden managed without this, after this. So you can say it's like lechem. For 39 years, they were not in Eretz Yisrael until they went to Eretz Yisrael. So that would be another difficulty. The Rebbe Zokt Rashi, Neuchlem kelechem. Therefore, gleich zu lechem ubediuk, will eat them like bread, is specifically like bread, not just eating, not consuming, not easy. Eating like bread. Is not be'inyan anechitz v'echrech. It's not talking about how necessary it is, nor be'oifon ha'achila, nor how we're going to eat it. We know that eating bread is in a way of a special love of Hashem, as we've seen before in the parsha that will bring out. We eating them like bread, will consume them like lechem, that the conquering of Eretz Yisrael will be just like eating bread. In Vos, as Bashtei de Meile von Achila lechem, what is the advantage in eating bread? Darf Rashi nicht durchsteichen. Rashi doesn't need to interpret it. But the Ben Chumash Lemikra hat schon gelernt früher in Parshas Shelach. The 5-year-old learning Chumash already learned it before in the portion of Shelach. Rashi sagt. Rashi says, "As lechem was sholu kohigen." That the bread that they asked properly when the Yidden were asking for bread, but the Eibishter given that Hashem is going to give it in a way of love, of dearness, beponim meiris, and with a shining face. So when we come to this lachmeinu, and we're saying that it means we'll eat them like bread, for our statement. So we understand that das meint, what it means is as the Eibishter wird geben zu Eden, Hashem will give the Jews them kibush, the conquering achilas umis, to consuming the nation in an eifum from that achilah. It's going to take place in a way of dearness, umponim meiris, and the shining face. Azay vergitze lechem, just as he gives them bread. Neichlem kilechem, we'll eat it in as the bread which Hashem gives in a way of dearness. Und in dem besteht euch der Tam, oif, and this also gives the reason. Al tirou ki lachmeinu. Don't be afraid because they are lachmeinu. They're like bread. We get it with dearness. Klal, don't be afraid at all. Al tirus hamaoretz. Don't be afraid, the people. Wow. Because they will be given in a way of dearness and a shining face from above. Okay. So that explains the Rashi of Lachmeinu. Now about the two Perushim of Sortzilum, the Rebbe addresses now in Oisai. The Geya, the Tzvei Perushim from Rashi in Sortzilum, as far as the two Rashi's commentaries in the Sortzilum, is move on the Meile von Zweiten Perush, von Ersten, von Lashon Rashi Gufa. So the advantage of the second interpretation over the first one, we understand it from Rashi's language itself. In Zweiten Pirush, Dr. Rashi, Tziloi shel hamokoim sor me'aleya. The quote from the Pasuk, Rashi doesn't bring down the word me'aleya, but in the second Pirush, Rashi adds the words, Tziloi shel hamokoim sor me'aleihem. So the me'aleihem fits better according to the second interpretation. Because Masha'enke b'tchilas hadibur, when Rashi quotes from the Pasuk, by Maitik Zayin Diverter from Pasuk, when he quotes the words from the verse that he's explaining, which is equal in both Pirushim, over there is a Maitik Nor Diverter Sort Silom. He only quotes the Sort Silom, Ned Malaya. So here you see that the key is, according to the second commentary, the word Ma'aleim fits better than it does in the first verse. So over there, Werter Sort Silon, nit the word Ma'aleim, but Rashi does not quote the word of Ma'aleim. So what's the explanation? When you remove a shade, means that you're moving it from one place to the other place. So if we're talking about Hashem removing it from the Goyim elsewhere, that's more fitting. Me'aleim, from them it was removed. But by Eve, that he died, it wasn't removed from them, it was just totally removed. So because of the Me'aleim, the second one is more fitting in the Pasuk. The Lashon Sor, when you say removed, Ubefrat, sort of me'aleim, especially when you say me'aleim, meant as the Zach is a weggegangen von sie is given, Freya, that it was left the place it was before, me'aleim. Und sie gefühlt sich jetzt in einer zweiten Ort, and now it's in a second place. Sie ist da bebezies euch später. That sale exists also later on, but instead of being aleihem, it's sor me'aleim somewhere else. But according to the first interpretation, that says that they died, turns out As their tzeil, it wasn't just remove them. It's the legamri nito. There is no tzeil anymore. Pas donid der loshin sor. So it doesn't fit the language removed. Umekolshke nid de hadgoshe sor me'alehem. Removed from them. So the second pirush is much better. The first pirush, sor me'alehem, doesn't fit. The Rebbe learned Rashi at zweiten pirush, so therefore Rashi learns the second pirush. As silom meant tzila shel hamoker. It's talking about Hashem's shade. Leidem pirush is glatik the loshen sor. That makes smooth the language of sor. Befrat sor meleim, also removed from them. Tzila shel hamoker is alamaldo. Hashem's shade always exists. See, is doch. Make him as brisi itchem, bezarachem acharechem, bezkol nefesh achaye goymer. The Eibishter says this is all b'nei noyach, with you and with your children that follow, with all the animals. The Eibishter says that he will be with them. There is an Eibishter share with them, and we say further, but verachem of kol ma'asav. God's compassion is everything that He created, including the goyim. It's always there. It says, "Ober sor me'aleim." Those people, Canaan, the people of Canaan, it's been removed from them. So why does Rashi bring down the first shot if it doesn't fit sor me'aleim? So the Rebbe says no. Ober oichle dem ersten pirush. It's not as smooth like the second pirush, but oichle dem ersten pirush. You can still explain the if you couldn't explain it even b'deichik, so then Rashi wouldn't bring it, and not especially not as a first one. But we can also explain it, also the language of sor meleh. Afal pi, even though as lefi pirush zei is tzilo mer nito b'metzias. According to that pirush, it's no longer in existence. Was the far bringt es Rashi, the Yisei de Mazal's erste pirush kedel. Come on. Even if we say that it doesn't exist, we can still say it, and Rashi still brings us even as the first pirush. So if it didn't make, if we couldn't answer it at all, then Rashi wouldn't bring it down at all. Not even certainly not the first pirush. So the Rebbe explains how it makes sense, because here we were just here not to talk about the sale. We're here to talk about the protection of the Canaanim, those were there, and therefore it doesn't make a difference really what happens. From them, it's removed. They know whether it's removed because he died, or it's not there at all, or it's just moved to another place. The intent is it's been taken away from them, and therefore, even if we should go according to the first shot that he died, it still fits. Yeshua v'kolev mitzeir zogn sor tzilom. And Yeshua v'kolev said their shade was removed. Kshedim shaben mesu, that the kosher amongst them died. Sein doch nit oisen gewent zu reden wegen tzilom. We weren't talking about their shade. What happened? Wegen the kshedim shaben. They weren't talking about the kosher amongst that's not the intent. But they're talking about the people of the land who they need to conquer now. Evement Silom is Megan, on whom that shade is protecting. As we bald, says Nito versus all Megan Zain of Zay, since we don't have anyone to shield them anymore, is Al Tiru as Amaoretz. Don't be afraid of the people of the land. Is doch don negeya nit was das tut sich mit Tzilom. So here it's not important what is going on with the Tzilom, nor was das tut sich mit Am Haaretz. We're concerned here, how is the Am Haaretz? Do they have a Tzil or not? The Farum sie gesagt, Sor Tzilom me'aleim. From them, there is no Tzil. Doesn't matter whether the Tzil is gone totally or dead or whatever, it doesn't matter. As is nitobos tomorrow, there's nothing to fear them. From them, their tzeil has been separated. Choch b'negei tzilam, although as far as their shade, that really what happened, it didn't just take away from them. Is nidloi certain or mesu, they died. But yet, as far as the Am Ha'aretz, what they're concerned is, they no longer have the shade. But it is still a little problem. It's squeezed. It's better. Bring Rashi a zweiten pirush. According to the second, Rashi brings a second pirush, which, according to that, the Eberster is there even after he removed the tzilam. So that's better to say sar tzilam aleim where it's in existence. But we said before, this also makes the pirush magina v'choskom chulat anor. This also has room. This is also makes sense to say sor meleh. But not only that, but it's actually first pshat. V'adrabe. First pshat is the first one in Pashtus Aksuvim. We're talking about the nations of the world, so therefore we're talking about. So when we say sor tzilam, it makes more talking about their people who provide a shade for them, not somebody outside Hashem. In Pashtus Aksuvim, simple meaning of the pasuk is their pirush mistaber yosef. The first one is more logical. Since these verses talk about the nations, is mistaber, it makes sense to say as mit wort tzilam meint men zeir tzel, their shade, kshedim shabahem, their kosher ones, nit tzile shalamokim. Tzilam is their shade, to say it's somebody who is amongst them, their shade from the people amongst their people. That if it would be Hashem, it should say Sor Hatzel. The shade has removed. The far is the pirush magina v'choskon v'chulu, the pirush rishon. That's why the pirush magina v'choskon is the main and the first interpretation. So in Ois Ches, the Rebbe starts to explain this wondrous things of tying in these two opinions, whether the shade means the Egyptian, the Eiv, the kosher amongst the Canaanim, has left them, or the Tzeil of Hashem. Is there a Tzeil of Hashem on Goyim to begin with, or there is no Tzeil? A machlokes between the Rambam and the Ravid, whether Goyim are an entity that warranted sale from Hashem or not. A whole long, big discussion in the halacha, as well as later on in the Yonim and Yena Shel Torah. Ches. From the Yonim Ufloim and Pirush Rashi, from the wondrous thing in Rashi, the Tzvei Pirush Rashi, these two interpretations of Rashi, who the sale is, Zanetolin that Plukta von Rambam V'Ravid, are hinged on the disagreement, the argument between the Rambam and the Ravid. Now, we know that there's a difference, that if the animal is shechted, then it's not tamei. But what happens if the behemoth is a nevela, is killed, not through shechita, or dies by itself, then it becomes nevela. Then it's metame. If you carry it, it makes the person tamei. So the Rambam paskent, so the Rambam rules, what happens? Shchitas akum. The akum shechted it. So we're saying when a goy shechts the animal, he makes it into nevela. And the Rambam says, umetamo b'maso. So that if one would carry that nevela, that is shechted by the goy, it's metame. Echod akum, whether it's mamish and akum, echod akusi, whether it's akusi, which also has the status of an akum, or ger toshav, or a convert that is only accepted the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach. He's allowed to live amongst the Yidden in Eretz Yisrael. Also a goy, shchitaso nevela. When they shecht it, they make it into nevela, and therefore it's metame b'masa. And the Rambam says, "V'korev be'einai." It's likely, in my eyes, sha'av zeh midivrei sofrim, that this tumah that the akum makes for the shchita, makes it into nevela, that it's no good, is only midrabanan midivrei sofrim, because he says shari tumas avedazora vetumas tigruvrovaso midivreim. The tumah of that one will carry an idol, for example, or the food that is offered, or whatever is offered to the avedazora. So that tumah that the person becomes tamei from the avedazora, and the kriva is midrabanan. So the same thing, the Rambam argues, the tumah that the goy makes it nevela, that the masa korbeina, that it's only the Sofrim. The Ravid is masike from Rambam Muzokt. He challenges the Rambam, and he says, "Akum heim kibehemas." He says the goyim have a status of behemoths, and therefore the ein mitamin, they cannot be mitame anything else. The ein mitamin, and they don't become tame themselves, because they're am hadoim el chamoir. They're a nation that has been equated to a chamoir, to a donkey. And further, the pasuk says, "Hein goyim kemar midli." They are like a drip of the bucket, the bottom of the bucket, like a drip of the bottom of the bucket, which has no value. As kulam yisaruach, let they all be taken by the wind. The words of the Ravid, one who considers them to anything, osif ruach b'chofma, has gathered ear in his hands, meaning nothing. There's no mitzias over there. So the Ravid basically says that the goy cannot make the shechita, cannot make it a nevela. With his act doesn't count anything. He doesn't make it. It's not the goy that makes the nevela, because he's not an entity to make the nevela. Frag the Kesem Mishnah from the Ravid, so the Kesem Mishnah asked the Ravid, "Vos is don negeyas akum ein metamin ve metamin." What is it here? How does this connect the fact that he brings down that a goy cannot become tamei, cannot make tamei, cannot become tamei? We're not talking about this goyim tzizei zayne metamim adanit. We're not talking about whether they can be metam or not. We're talking about, is there shchita make the nevela or not? As the Rambam said, is mevayer the Ragachover. So the Ragachover explains the Asogas HaRavid. What is the Ravid asking? When is shayich as the shchita so mekalkel sein machen van nevela? When can you say that the shechting ruins it and makes it for nevela? Davke if der sheichet is a metzius al pi halacha. Only if he's an entity, he's a metzius. You're shechting it, ruining it, if you are a entity. Oh, you is began that header, but if he is in the definitely non-existent, is the chaychas as kalimach. It's not possible for it to ruin. Nothing cannot ruin. And that's what Ravid says. Bald as akum heim ki behemas ve'ein mitamin ve'ein mitamin, since they are like animals and they don't become tamei, they can tam anything else. Zan is a ruach, so that means they're ear, header, they're non-existent. Is the shaykh zu zogun as a shchitas on makalkal zayin, so it doesn't apply to say that their shchita should ruin machem far nevela. It makes it nevela. Now, also according to the Rambam, that meat would be nevela, and adarabah, it'll be nevela because it's like an animal died by itself. Und the Rebbe learned the Raivet, Ashchitas akum nevela. Why is it nevela shchitas akum? Is just nit weil der akum is mekalkel. It's not because of the act of the akum, nor mitzadem, but shchitas akum is nit keshchita. It's not a shchita, so nothing was metayr. Ubemela is as nevela. It is, if it wasn't shechted, it's nevela ki behemoth shemeis melah. It's not that the goy did it, but the behemoth died from its own. Rebbe says, explains further a little bit. But so basically, the Raiva, the way the Ragachover explains, is that he brings it just to prove that the goyim are a non-entity. So why does the Rambam have to choose specifically that they don't become tamei, not entity? Because the Rebbe explains, because you can't say that goyim are not entities totally, because the Zor of a goy is an entity. But as far as Tuma goes, since you see relationship, there is not entity. They're not become Tomei, they don't become mother. The Chayre, the Fiyah, from Ragachover would seem, according to the explanation of the Ragachover, is the Dona gave us is an header. What we need to find out here is that they are that they're non-existent. Is in them inyan from Tuma Davke. So why do we need to know? Why does it make that this is specifically in Tuma? We see that they're a non-entity. Kemen Zog, the Rebbe wants to explain here this point that Lekula Alma, according to all opinion, which is also according to the view of the Ravid, Zainen Do, Kama v'kama in Yonim and Halacha, there are many matters of Halacha, was B'negeya Zei, Zainen, Akum Megedem Etzias, as far as they're concerned, they are an entity. If a goy has an avodah zara, so it's osur to benefit for a yid too. So what are we going to say? He's not an entity. How could he make a avodah zara? Right? The river can the Ravid need zog stam. Cannot just say blanket. As akum hem ki behemoth da behemoth. Alamo all the time. The river is a meisif from a vayir. That's why he adds and he explains. Ein mitamin ve'ein mitamin, that they don't become tumah, they can't make others tumas. But shayches to tumah, zanezeki behemoths. When it comes to tumah, they're like behemoths. Together header, then they are in the definition of header. Osaf ruach b'chofna. You gather ruach in your fists, in your hands, and ubemele ken ze doch nit machen die behemische shachtu. They can't make that this behem the shech is on metame zayin b'masa. It should be metame b'masa. The reason it's metame b'masa is not because the goy made it nevela. It's because it's a dead behem. It wasn't shechted, then it's behem by itself. So we have a disagreement over here whether akum are existence or they're not existent. They're machloikis from Rambam or Ravid, akum. Seine together mitzius or together header, whether they're the definition of an entity or they're a non-entity. This follows their view. See by akum is shaykh geder hashgacha pratis, whether by non-Jews is the definement, we define specific supervision Does Hashem supervise the acts Goyim? The Das or Rambam as is eine begeder mitzias, according to the Rambam's view that they are an entity, is Gam Heim, according to the Rambam, have a geder hashgacha pratis. They too, they're an entity. There's also the divine specific supervision on them. But according to the view of the Rambam, that they are in the definition of non-existent, so they don't have the defined divine providence. So now the Rebbe is tying this to the Tupshot Merash. As die zwei Pirushim in Rashi, these two interpretations, Tzitzilom meant Magina v'Choskov, does it mean their protection, their strengths, or the Tzile Shel HaMokim, or it means the protection, the shade of Hashem. So Anatolui in Deis Harambam Arambam, they hinge on the views of the Rambam and the Rambam. Leuten Ersten Pirush, according to the first interpretation, that it's the protection of the Kshedim, beginning of Choskom, Zainem B'nei Neir Begeder Heder. So they are in the definition of not existing. Kishitas Raivan. The Riber kemen nit mefarish zayin. Therefore, you cannot interpret as Silam gate of Tzila Shalamokim. You can't go on the shade of the Shem's protection. Was given freer Tzilam nit Sarmalem. Before it was a shade and now over them, and now it was removed. Because if that would be the case, that those beweistas is that they are a true entity, they have a tzil from Hashem. They have the shade of Hashem. And is shaykh und aufgemossen, it applies and is measured according to their entity. Because what is a shade? The shade, literally, what is a shade? It's measured, from them Adam, that comes from the person. They are not existence. And as Ragashover explained, that there is no divine providence because there is nothing there, there's no entity. And therefore we have to explain. Therefore, according to this, you can't say it's Tzila Shamakim because there is no Tzila Shamakim because we don't have any measured supervision according to their level. So Muslim Farzan, that does mean Muginam B'Choskom, that it means their protection, their strength, Shadim Shabahem Meisukul, is the kosher amongst them that die. Aber nit Tzila Shalamokim Salmalem, but it's not the shade of Amokim that removes them. Mashenki in Leitin Tzveitin Pirush, as opposed to the second interpretation, Zane Beneneach Begeder Mitzias, Kishita Saramba. So over there, the Beneneach are in the definition of an existence, as the Rambam's view is. And there is divine supervision on them. But mainly, that's why it does make sense, applies to say, Asile Shalamokim is Misyaches Aleim, that the shade of Hashem relates to them. She is shaykh to their mitzvahs canal. It applies and it belongs, it connects with their mitzvahs. So that's the halachic part. And the Rebbe explains now more in the Pnimius Inyonim exactly what the idea of a shade, that a shade means that Hashem tzilcha, like the Baal Shem Tov says. In other words, that you impact what goes on above, which relates to these two opinions. You would clever with the Zayin verstandig of Pnimius Inyonim. We can understand this more clearly according to the inner matter of things. The pirush from Siloi Shalamokim is, what does it mean, the shade of the Mokim? As the Pa'ulis Odom Tu Noifaninyan Lamaila Bedumas Ubitzira Pulo, that the acts of the person accomplish something above, which is similar in the shape of what you're doing. Similar to the Baal Shem Tov's interpretation on the verse, God is your sail, God is your shape. Hashem tzilcha. As loidin yonim vosai tut lamato, that according to the way, the matters that a yid does here below, tu sich oif dugmosam in yonim lamailo. So similar to that are accomplished matters above. We do here, there's a shade that mimics, reflects the acts of here. Commercial silodom, like the example of the shade of a person. From the mention, based on the movements of the person, the exact same thing is in the shade. Similar is also the shade of Mokim umas ha'ilom, as it is with regards to the nation of the world. Hashem does not take away the reward of all creation. So their actions, so to speak, accomplish of bringing down the shade. That means that something from above extends below to them. They act, shades brings down from above. When they do a good act, they for fulfilling the 7 Noachite mitzvahs are similar. They are given reward. And when they violate an avera, then from above there is a tzel. Something which is similar to what they did, a hezek, an einish to get a punishment. That's the idea of a tzel. But this only applies, according to the Rambam's view, as umas oilam zayne begeder mitzias, that the nation of the world are defined in that they are existence. Dan is shaykh zogen. Then it applies to say, even the tzel, that there is something which comes from below in a way of a shade sir prati, in a specific shape, behesem, to them was that fits, that the gamheim have a gedras gocha pratis, the Loshna Rambam. They too are in specific supervision, so therefore their specific act can get that specific reaction or hamshachim al mayl. In the das Ravid, as opposed to the opinion of the Ravid, as is eine beged the header that they are in the definition of not, is nicht shaykh zu sagen azera puulo, so mamshich sein an inyan dugmosim al mayl, not apply to say that their act to bring down a similar something from above. Behesem l'shitosei as is ein nid beged rashgacha pratus. And this fits that they're not in divine providence. So there's no, what they do, it doesn't matter. So it doesn't supervise what they do. The Vishitas Aramba Ravid, so if Hashem doesn't supervise, so how is their punishment and reward for the Agdik Chotim? So according to the Ravid's view, is there schar, ba'einish, ba'umas ha'ilam, atitzo, it's a result of derech memela, it comes automatically with derech tofel, and a secondary from tachlis briyosa, from the goal of their creation, so there is a result. They have been created for a yid, and the punishment that comes as a result of their creation for the yid. Similar to what we find reward and punishment by living things. Is the Torah zogt. Torah says that killed the behemoth. Choj by behemoth is the shaykh kichet, although by behemoth doesn't apply any sin. Behemoth machata. What did they use in quoting the Lashon? What did the behemoth sin? Because the person came to him as stumbling through this animal. That's what we're talking. So as it relates to the person, that's the einish. It does not be gather einish. So it's not as a punishment, but it's a result. Since the goal of the creation of the behemoth is to serve the person, the behemoth is nit mishamish dimension. When the animal does not serve the person, nor is it bring him but on top of that, it also brings in a stumbling. Is the talking ort farir mitzias? So then there is no room for her to continue to exist, and that's why the Torah says kill the behemoth. A similar way is the reward and punishment when we talk about the nation of the world. The bald as the tachlis brias koloilam is bishvil Yisrael, since the goal of creation of all the world is for a yid, is mukhrach. It has to be as the mitzvah and its b'nei neyach is. We have to also say that the mitzvahs, even the mitzvahs that they were commanded, but it's everything is for a yid. So what is the mitzvah of Neyach have? It's just not the mitzvahs and Tztav Yisrael. They're not the same as the mitzvahs that the yidden have. These are for goyim and these are for yidden. Because the tachlis is that etzem kiyum mitzvah. By a yid, the goal is for them to do the mitzvah, that itself. Nor is an inyan tofel. They're doing the mitzvah as secondary b'shvil Yisrael for the yid. As we've spoken sometime at length, the mitzvahs they do is so that the world will be settled. So that the Yidden can make a dwelling place for Hashem to the fulfillment of Torah mitzvah. So that's why we have the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei. So they're not just a mitzvah for them to do for their own sake. It is to serve to make the world an inhabitable place so that the Yid can turn it around and make it into a Dira Leis Baruch through Torah mitzvahs. And therefore, is euch der schar ve'enish of the mitzvahs of the reward and punishment for these 7 mitzvahs, a mesuvav. It's a result. It's an effect from the cause TV lamata that comes automatically from their goal. Their goal is to serve the Yid, and if they don't serve the Yid, so then they don't have the goal in there. So there's punishment. There's no existence, and if they do, there's the reward as a result for the Yid, for their serving the Yid. Is was by Nenoich is Bechlal, they're talking Chelek. We understand why there is no difference in punishment. Every punishment is Bechlal Shove B'chol Chet. It's inclusive, it's general. For every sin that they do is Misa, is death. Why? Nitvi by a sale. By a shadow was the sale that Nistan Lefev pulls out, it changes by the shade of the person. Over here, it doesn't change by what they did, this or that, because it's not really a shade. It's not a result of it. It doesn't follow. It doesn't bring out. It's only what comes out is only a result from the action, but not from above. And this, according to the inner meaning, and also halacha, tzvish debate the pirush in Rashi, in both the commentaries of Rashi. The erste pirush is kishita sarayvet. The first interpretation is like the Rayvet. As ben noyach, zayne begetter heder, ben noyach are in the definition of heder. They're not. Their reward and punishment is as a result, a consequence that comes automatically. Like I said before. And the Rebbe learned that, and therefore he learns as the Pirush from Tzilom, the meaning of Tzilom Shein is nit Tzila Shel Mokim. Does not mean Hashem's tzel, because there is no tzel, nor beginom v'choskom, but it means Shelach, their protection. Dur the Ksherim Shabem, there are kosher ones amongst them, Vertin ze achayzek, becomes a strength in them. This is aber nit kin inyan was a true of the mile. It's not something that they accomplish above. Going don't do that. There's no sale from above. Mashenkin, the zweite Pirush for Rashi is Kishitz Rambam. The second one is like the Rambam, like the view of the Rambam, as they seine together Metzias, that they are in the definition of Metzias. The Yesh Behem get that Ashgocha Protis, and they have the definition of specific supervision, and therefore there is a tzel there. Now, Choch Azoichel Das Rambam. Although, even according to the Rambam, is the Metzias from Bnei Noach, that the existence of Bnei Noach and the Zion and Mitzvah Shelach, and also the 7 mitzvahs B'Shvil Yisrael, is because of the given of the mitzvahs, but since they were instructed of the mitzvahs, ubefratz as the Zion mitzvahs Tzivu B'Hen HaKadosh Baruch Hu B'Torah, especially that this was instructed them in the Torah by the owner of the Moshe Rabbeinu, and he told us through Moshe Rabbeinu, darf man sagen, then we need to say Adur Zeh Mekayim Zeh the Tzivu from Eibishten, that when they fulfill the commands from Hashem, Poilun Zeh Dugmosei, they impact similar Amshocha Milmailo, the way it comes down from above. But Mele is by say Shaykh zu sagen, and therefore it applies to say by them as Tziloi Shalamokim, that there is a shade of Mokim, but Nimshach Alein Beifan Atzel, it extends to them in a way of Atzel, which means Tzir Prati, in that specific shape, the way they're doing it, Biz as Vertanguruf and Tzilam, to the extent that it's called Tzilam. In Ois Yud Beis, the Rebbe is finally going to explain what the Chlal was added with the Kisor Tzilim Aleim. The Rebbe is going to explain. It seems like everything was covered before, and here we have Kisor Tzilim Aleim Vashemir Maltiron. A lot of extras. What are the extras? The Rebbe explains that there is a balance, just as Sor Tzilim Aleim is Vashem Itonu. Yidden are much more connected. They have the Tzeil of Hashem in a much stronger way. So there's another deeper and more inyonim over here that they added with their saying Kisor Tzim Aleim. Let's look inside. With base. Apizevet men noch besser verstehen das Boris hat Mias in Hemshech HaKsuvim or Pirush Rashi. Based on what we just explained, the idea of a tzel of a goy, how a goy is different than a yid, will understand the questions we have in the flow of this psukim and Rashi. Aleph, the first question is to livosam Yeshua v'kol meisiv given sor tzilim aleihim. Why did they add their shade has left them? They already said basically everything they needed to say. Hashem altim reidu shuv. They said before, they had to say that if Hashem wants. They said, that was necessary. And then you're not going to be afraid. So they had to say that, as we said before, that we're going with Hashem's power. Is klal nit shaykh oicha pitava. Therefore, even naturally, it doesn't apply to Meirab. For the Mamoras, there's nothing to be afraid of the people of the land. And also further, they continue saying they are like lachmenu. So we're saying nechem kalechem, as the Eibishter that the way the Eibishter will going to give them over to the Yidden, that a chiba upon iris in a way of love and in a shining face. All necessary. Is thus outsmevire the matzav the Eden from Zion. This explains to us why Eden should be. Don't worry, don't be afraid. Hashem will give it to you. Hashem is dearness, everything. Why does he have to add later on what's going on with the goyim? Why is it important to us to know what's going on over there? Why is that important to us? Different style. If why do we need to know what's going on with the tzilam? We just know that we don't have to be afraid. But whether the tzilam is there or not, why is that important? So what do we need? So the first question is, why do we need this chlal to say kisar tzim alei? Number two question is, With Balda as Neuchlam already say that we're going to consume them is Ma'atzman movement. As is Nitokim Mokim V'Tekif, that means I self-understood there is nobody shielding, there's no strength. So it's because you already said Neuchlam is Michael Mashal and Sortzilom. Why is he telling you against Sortzilom? Gimel Favosum ze Nochem Levi Chaz Al Tirom. Then they say again Al Tirom. Don't be afraid. A second time. You say to them is more than this. Erz Dokter as is genug as Altim Reidu. We just told you Altim Reidu. Then you won't have to be afraid. But the Mele Zayin, the Mele Shuv Zayin Al Tiro. And do Yizar Meisvatam Hashem Itonu. What is it? The Hashem is with us. It's a new reason. So in the beginning, them the Kibush Am Haaretz is given drei sugim. There are three categories when they conquered. There was with those that mason, those that didn't, that they died right away from the nations. 7 nations of Canaan. The Geirash Tomei, Gleich, then you have those who were chased away immediately. That means Batal Gamri, that they totally are negated. And then Agurshenu Nochdem, that later on they were chased away. As Nochdem as Tifra, when you will multiply, then you will chase them away. These are the others that were in Eretz Canaan. Insufficient, and until the time that they were chased away, they were like our servants, lachmenu, till the time that they were chased away. And to follow the above, I feel a late in Zweiten Pirish Varashi, even if according to the second Pirish Varashi, that everyone say now that Hashem Itonu is a stronger than even if we say that Goyim do have itself. I feel a late in Zweiten Pirish Varashi as Ba'u Masaylim is not Tzila Shalamokim. That by the nation of the world there is Tzila Kshit is a Rambam. As the Rambam's where Yesh Bem Geder Ashgacha Pratis, that there is the definition of specific supervision is the removing the pashtus, but itself understood. Ados is klal need v'dashgacha prochas eviden. It's all not compared to the divine providence for Yidden. Okay, now we said before, as the mitzvahs from Eden is the kavan in Ze'alein. The mitzvah Yidden is the intent in the Yidden, while the goyim is for even if they have supervision. We explained that the Rambam holds. And once they were commanded, so there is a specific connection to that. But it's at all not the Yids. A connection with Hashem and supervision. They emphasize the Taine as Om Goyber. He said it's a powerful nation. If you don't rebel against Hashem, then you don't have to worry about the Azoritz. There's nothing to fear the Amoritz. In welchem Matzev der Am soll nicht sein. It doesn't matter whether they have a protector, don't have a protector. You don't have to worry because Hashem itan. The noch haben sie meisiv given noch mehr. Then they added even more. Sor tzilom mei aleim. Sor tzilom aleim means like this. What is it? So this in both pirush. Loi me boilet neshte pirush in Rashi asor meginam v'choskom, that they are their strength has left them. According to the other one, unochmer vidosis v'Hashem is noritonu, and Hashem do us. So, in other words, they don't have their strength. That's according to the first parash. Also, they don't have Hashem's protection, and more so, Hashem is with us, and we have protection, which is the total opposite of Sort Silom, because Hashem is eternal with us. Not only aren't we lacking the shade of Hashem, but Hashem eternal, but Hashem is with us. This haste, by the nation of the world, even when there is Ashgacha, It's a shade, it's over them. But by Eden is their Eberster, not only surrounding, but Chitonu is with us. Mit Zayin Hashgocha, Hashem with his supervision, is sich b'syachet mit uns, he unites with us. Is a mele move on, as does bring nit nor, that does bring not only Altiris Amor, it's not to fight the people of the land, nor oich Altirom, stam. Don't be afraid generally, nit nor as ever ois am ha'oretz. They're not going to be any more people of the nation because we're getting the land of Israel. Ze seien nor ametzias von lachmenu. They're only ametzias like our lachmenu, that at least they have some sort. We can use them as a voting for some. Nor ze werden ois mitzias legamri. They will be no longer in existence. Balsor tzilam aleim. They don't have any more tzilaro. These are also three categories of loischaya kol neshama, which they died right away. Osu sholem, given lamasi, they made peace and they served you. And Girgoshi Pinal Africa. Girgoshi was moved to Africa. So basically, in the beginning, we take them away. And Soif said, and then he came with an argument that he didn't throw him out. So the same thing Ruim, Kamemshin the 2 years. Their field when they're sown and their orchards when they're planted. Just to go over this last piece again, seems that a little bit, the Sikh is a little bit shorthand, and I think we need to explain this a little bit more. So when the Rebbe talks about the three categories before, that's from the pasuk in Mishpatim. So we had the three categories. What were the three categories? There were the people. It says in the pasuk, "The chadativ, I will destroy them." So those are the people that died immediately. And then you had, the pasuk continues, the Eibishter sends the tzira, which will chase them away, they will run away. Immediately, they run away. It's the second category. And the third category is agorsheno, says ma'at agorsheno. The Eibishter is not going to chase them away immediately. It's only going to be after, when you multiply, then Hashem is going to chase them away. And these three categories are the emphasis of the Yeshua and Kalev, what they're saying to the people. One thing they said to them was, Altirom, Bashem Altimroidu, the Shuv Altirom, the first thing. The second thing they said to them is Kisor Tzilom Aleim. And the third thing they said to him is Vashem Itom. So the first part, when they said, don't be afraid, we're talking about, it doesn't matter whether they have a sale, they don't have a sale. It's not at all about what they have. Don't be afraid of them. If you are not going to rebel against Hashem, then you don't have to know. And then they added an additional, that not only is Sor Tzilam Aleim, and in all the Pshot of Sor Tzilam Aleim, no, they added Sor Tzilam Aleim. In addition to Al Tirohum, they said Sor Tzilam Aleim. And then they added another thing is Vashem Yiton. Meaning that Hashem is going to take away the tzeil from them. And therefore, it's going to be the second level, is going to be like the Geit Hashtami immediately. So you don't have to be afraid of them, even if they stay there or they don't stay there, you're going to win them anyways. But that's going to be the second step, is going to be the Geit Hashtami, to chase them away. And then the third one is Hashem Yitonu, that the Chlal, our tzeil is different, and they're not even going to be there because even as servants, in the first aspect, when he says, "Don't be afraid of them," okay, don't be afraid of them. The Yidden will take over, and they can still be their existence. But doesn't say what happens to them. But then we're saying, not only don't be afraid of the Amoritz that they're going to interfere, but you don't have to be afraid because Hashem is giving us Eretz Canaan, but they can still be a level of Lachmenu. In other words, don't be afraid. There can be servants, so they'll be in existence. So after the not being afraid, but maybe they'll be in existence. So then we say Vashem Yitonu, that they'll become totally out of Mitzias. That also fits in. Shalmi brings down, the Rebbe quotes here, that there were, when the Yidden came to Eretz Yisrael, they gave them a choice. Either they fight L'Schai Kol Neshama. If they wanted to make peace, then they can stay there and be under the Yidden. So that would be Lachmenu Haim. So Sort Silam Lachmenu Haim. So they're still existing, but they're Avodim to the Yidden. And then you have the level of Hashem Yitonu, which would be the third one. They ran away. And that's what Girgoshi Pinal Africa that brings down. And then they came back, and the Rebbe says that they inherit and get older. It's still not so clear. It's a little bit shorthand over here. Need to look at it a little further. And on another opportunity, this is Mesichas Shabbos Parshas Shelach, Tovshin Lamed, and Tovshin Lamed Hey.